I know you've probably heard about the 5 love languages, but did you also know that there are 5 anger languages? First, let's talk about what anger actually is. It is valid. I don't want you to hear what I'm about to say and think that somehow I'm trying to invalidate your feelings, but I do want you to ponder that anger is actually a secondary emotion, meaning it usually masks something else on a deeper level. Usually that thing is fear, but there are some other emotions that you may be able to sort of identify as what causes your anger. Now, when we think about fear in relationships, a lot of times that causes fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing someone, fear of not being able to be heard or listened to, fear of some element that makes your security not feel quite on the level that you want it to be. Now, when we talk about this idea of security and attachment, this is how the different things that I talk about in my video blog build on one another. So first we talked about the attachment styles, then we dug into the concept of the 5 love languages, and now we're talking about the 5 anger languages. So as I go through this today, I just want you to be thinking about how do these different anger languages show up for you, and how might they be playing out in your relationship. Anger is not bad. Our society sometimes tells us that anger is not okay and we shouldn't show it or we shouldn't feel it. I am not in the business of teaching you that, but I do want you to start getting in touch with what is the thing beneath the thing as I go through the 5 anger languages. The first anger language I want to talk about is the righteous anger. This is the I'm right, you're wrong argument. It tends to be a very ego-driven thing, and it's often where you may find a lot of past mistakes being thrown at each other in an argument, almost like you're holding a scorecard and saying, you did this, you did this, you did this, I'm right, you're wrong, and here's why. That's sort of how the righteous anger shows up. Then we move into the concept of indignation. This is sort of the, I can't believe you would do that. How dare you treat me that way? It's also one of those things that starts to feel like a guilt trip that you may be trying to put on the other person or that's being put on you. And so this indignation type of anger is not ideal because it's definitely staying in that scorekeeping that we're talking about, but just a little bit of a different approach to the same thing. Moving along into retribution. This is almost like vengeful, or this idea that you did that, I'm gonna remember it, I'm gonna hold it against you, and I'm gonna get you back. It's not really a healthy way to express anger because it's basically saying, well, you did this to me, so now I'm gonna do this back to you, and it doesn't really allow for a lot of understanding. There's also this element to it that says, I might forgive you, but I'll never forget. And although I'm not suggesting it's easy to forget the wrongs that someone may have done to you, holding it sort of hostage and feeling like you're forever going to hold that against the person is probably not allowing there to be a lot of flow of new information and shifting into a new way of experiencing the relationship. As we move into the concept of the distraction type of anger, this is also sort of known as deflection. It's kind of the, well, what about you? Well, what about this other thing? Well, let's not talk about the issue at hand, but let's talk about 7 other things that may not actually be related. Or let's deflect by, instead of taking ownership for my actions, I throw it back at you and try to ask you why you don't trust me, why you're always on my case, why do you do this, why do you do that? So instead of actually working on the issue at hand, it's distracted and deflected onto something else, and nothing really gets accomplished. This is a conversation ender in a lot of cases, and it stalls out the communication. The last anger language I want to talk about is justification. This is sort of another form of scorekeeping. You're going to hear that theme throughout because anger tends to be very scorekeeping at the core. But the justification is like, you had it coming. You deserve that. It's kind of this way of almost blaming someone else for how you feel and feeling like vindicated or somehow really happy when something bad happens to them. Like it's justifying any bad behavior or bad actions because you're so angry and upset with how they are showing up. I am not suggesting that anger is avoidable or should be avoided. In fact, I do think that healthy arguing can be a part of a healthy relationship dynamic. That being said, if these 5 anger languages are showing up on a constant basis, or you're noticing a cycle, or you're noticing a repeat of like the same conversation over and over and over and over again, that may be where you are needing some kind of like communication reset, a relationship reset, so to speak. And that's where it's going to have to come back to, how can we have courageous conversation to get to the thing beneath the thing, to figure out why the anger is surfacing, and is there a way to restructure the communication? I'm going to have a lot more detail on this in future videos. It's a very complex topic, but I'm trying to give you a good overview of what to expect when thinking about the 5 anger languages.